This is the Cool Guys podcast right here. Richard and, of course, Denny Cool. Richard, unless you want to be called a different name.
Nah, Richard is great.
Is one of the things that made me laugh is one of these questions. it says, what if Elvis had lived another 30 years?
He did. Right?
You know what's
the Reverend what's his face?
oh man, yeah. Go it's Bob.
Yeah, Bob somebody.
Bob's. Listen, when I first started learning about this guy, and somebody said, Denny, I think Elvis is alive. Now, I've been hearing that for so many years, of course, right? Mm-hmm. But before I get to Bob, years ago, when I was in my teens, I watched this program. It was hosted by Bill Bixby. You know who he was, right?
Oh, yeah, Bill Bixby, yeah.
Okay.
Great actor.
Well, he and Elvis were really good friends.
Really?
Yes. Oh, yeah. And he hosted, it was called the Elvis Files. He hosted this, it was like a documentary type miniseries thing. And it was on, I must have been, 16, 17 years old, I think. Yeah. And I watched it over at my aunt's house. It was called the Elvis Files. And the author was Gail Brewer Giorgio. Okay, look her up. Gail Brewer Giorgio. Okay. It's called the Elvis Files. Anyways, Bill Bixby, he went over all of this information, and what they discovered, well, allegedly, was that, like, his middle name being, it was missing an A. Or it had two A's, I forget which one it was. Elvis Aaron, so it had two A's instead of one. Okay, because his middle name was Aaron. And then his life insurance policy was cashed after he died. Mm-hmm. Okay. Different assets of his were sold off. And only at the time, he was the only one that could have done it. So there were certain things that took place that they discovered. And then on top of that, one of the biggest conspiracies out there is when you look at the casket and you look at the body that's in the casket, okay? Mm-hmm. 9 out of 10, I'm going to say 9.9 out of 10, when people die and they're in a casket, they get embalmed, all that stuff, well, they don't really look the best. I mean, they don't look younger, per se, like by 30, 40 years.
Sure.
And when Elvis died, he was over 300 pounds.
Yeah, I was going to say, he got really large there at the end.
But when you look at the casket, he looked like an Elvis from, say, 58, 63. Right? Yeah. He looked in his bodyguard, Red West, at the time. He was part of this documentary. And he was interviewing with Bill Bixby. And he said that was not Elvis in there. He said, I'm going to tell you, he said that was a live person in there. And Bill Bixby said, what do you mean a live person? He goes, yeah, somebody suited and made up to look like Elvis. He goes, dead people don't sweat.
Yeah.
And you could see, so when they zoomed in the pictures, you could see beads of sweat coming down the side of the temples, or wax, wow. Whatever. Yeah. So there were a lot of different things going on.
Well, I know I've seen where they were interviewing his ex-wife and daughter, mm-hmm. and they referred to him in the present tense when they were having the discussion. And it's like, I'm sorry, that's not a mistake that you make unless, you're not thinking about your answers and you're just speaking, without thinking about what you're saying, and you're actually speaking the truth. I mean, that's, to speak of him in present tense, like, we just discussed this, the other, whatever it was they were talking about. I think it was some finances or something. And so when I saw those interviews, I'm like, wait a minute. But, I've always thought, I've kind of studied some of the conspiracies on his death and stuff, but I know from what I've read, Elvis was very unhappy towards the end there. And how else do you? I don't think he's probably the only one that when you're in that kind of a life, you're tired of the life, but you are that famous. How do you continue your life in a way where you get out of that life without actually dying? Because people are going to constantly follow you, constantly harass you. And if you just wanted to get away from that and go back to the simplicity of life, I think that's really the only way you could do that, is to fake your death so that you can go under another name and just kind of blend into the crowd and live a normal life. And if he really wanted to get out, I mean, I wouldn't have blamed him for doing that if that's what he did.
I wouldn't have either. You got to remember this, too. Now, see, it would have been about nearly 50 years after his death, right? You've got thousands of people, probably millions at this point, still believe he never died. And so the question then becomes, is there any tangible evidence? I mean, any shred of evidence that the greatest entertainer who ever lived, right, is still alive, or is it a myth? Is it all conspiracy? But a lot of people believe it because of what you and I were just discussing, and I had to look that up. Yeah, so his middle name, was spelled A-R-O-N, while his gravestone originally used A-A-R-O-N, suggesting that it wasn't really him. See, because legally, if the name is spelled incorrectly on the gravestone, then that's not the legal person that's in there, right? It's not them. Yeah, so legal. Now I don't know all the technicality behind it, but then again, the whole casket thing. A lot of people believe that it was somebody posing or it was a waxed dummy. Because if you actually look up, if you were to Google that or whatever it is used for a browser, look that up and look at the image of Elvis in the casket and then look at him before he died, you're going to say to yourself, there's no way that's the same man. There's absolutely no way. And then this guy, what was his name? Bob, what was his name? Let's see, I'm going to research it. Yeah. Now, I've listened to this guy. I've watched videos when it was brought to my Bob Joyce. Bob Joyce.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Here he is, Bob Joyce. Now, have you ever heard this guy sing?
Yeah, I think you featured it
I did.
On one of your shows. And, the voice is really close. And, it's one of those things where even if it isn't, we know that Elvis always resorted back to the gospel music. That's where I think where his heart really was.
Right.
And so again, if he wanted to go into that, his managers and stuff weren't going to allow him to go that route. So again, if you fake your death but you still want to sing and stuff like that, go into gospel singing, what a way to do it.
Well, that's the claim, Richard, is they're saying the uncanniness between Bob Joyce, the pastor from Arkansas, and Elvis, like his facial features, the hairstyle, and Elvis had a little left scar-type dimple above his left eye. Bob Joyce has the same thing. When you watch Bob Joyce play the piano, Elvis had a certain mannerism, like a distinct characteristic when he was singing, especially on the piano. Bob Joyce, it's almost identical to the way Elvis did it. When Elvis was singing, for example, like Unchained Melody, Elvis, or I should say any kind of power song like that, when he was sitting down on the piano, he would kind of make like a yelling, like gruntle sound, like, yeah. Bob Joyce does the same thing. His tones, the tone that Elvis had, and the pitch and the range, Elvis was pretty much almost one of a kind. They actually had professional, I don't know what they call them, I'll say register readers or something, or pitch readers. There's a term for it, where they register the person's pitch, range, tone, and all that. Elvis had his own. Like, he didn't fall in line with your average range, your average note, your average pitch. Elvis was kind of distinct. He didn't fall into that category, and it blew a lot of them away because they couldn't understand. He was singing almost false notes, but you couldn't tell. Mm-hmm. Bob Joyce, same thing. But here's the huge takeaway, is how old do you think Elvis would be? He died, what, August 16th, 1977, so he'd be late 80s by now, at least? Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't know too much about his ages and stuff.
Yeah,
that was before my time.
So, Bob Joyce is... How old is Bob Joyce? Let's ask my companion right here.
Well, I see a YouTube video here where he's preaching a sermon December 28th, 2025. So as of the end of last year, he was still preaching.
So, okay, well, here's the stats. Bob Joyce, born June 19th, 1952. So he'd be 74. Well, that's how old Bob Joyce is. Elvis Presley, born January 8th, 1935. Huge difference. That's what, 35. Elvis would be 91. Now, people still hold true that that's Elvis. And so you're talking almost 20-year difference. Okay?
Yeah.
Listen,
the picture, he looks more like he's in his 70s more so than his 90s, but, you know, that's just just looking at him, my take on it.
He could be
who's to say? Some people hold their age really well.
Well, here's the thing. I started watching or following Bob Joyce because I was interested, and in my head, I'm like, no, there's no way. There's no way that this guy is Elvis. Now, I don't think I'm a perfectionist or know everything when it comes to Elvis. I'm not. Did I study his voice? Absolutely. I studied every chord, his breathing techniques, how he sang, his deliverance. Okay, I did that for years. And so when it comes to vocal, I hear a lot of, yes, similarities in Bob Joyce, but there's a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of unique characteristics that Elvis had that even some who claim they're the best, you know, don't even come close to Elvis. I think Bob Joyce, without trying, if that's his natural voice, we don't know, but Bob Joyce, without trying, is probably the closest I've heard, with probably the exception of maybe Ral Donna, who's very, very, sounded like Elvis before Elvis was Elvis. But Bob Joyce, though, when I listen to him, there's a lot of things that I found that just don't line up. But one of the biggest takeaways, and like you said, here he looks like he's in his 70s. That could be a very well-aged 91-year-old Elvis. Mm-hmm. Okay, who has stamina. I mean, he looks like he's got some weight on him, all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So, factually, we don't know, Richard, but people, they're I think it comes down to sometimes we're defaulted where, if we lose a loved one or if a loved one gets sick, we don't want to let go. And I think that claim holds true when it comes to people like Elvis. People want to hold on to him because Elvis was one of a kind, hands down, one of a kind. So people who emulate him, right, they want to believe that he's still alive. Now, let's just, for show talk, say that he is. Mm-hmm. Let's say, hypothetically, this is Elvis, okay? Mm-hmm. And at 91, the guy looks great. Sounds great. What would it do? Like, if this was Elvis, let's be honest, what would it do? Like, is he going to make a comeback? Reclaim his throne? Well, he can't reclaim it. He's never lost that title as the king of rock. But, like, what would it achieve? Do you think, this is just my thought, do you think he would lose all of that credibility, status, respect, and everything if, in fact, this was him? I think he would.
From certain people, from the majority, I think, yes. Like, how dare he fake his death? The deceit in that. For someone like me, it's like I said before, I wouldn't fault someone like that for going that route if that's what he did to get out of that life. And if this, like you say, just hypothetically, if Pastor Bob Joyce truly is Elvis, I say the man is finally pursuing what I think he really wanted to do his whole life. And good for him if that's what he had to do that. But again, that's all hypothetical.
I think so too, and I think that if, in fact, this is a huge if I'm throwing out there, but if in fact that was Elvis, I personally think that if he tried to make a comeback, I honestly think that, he'd be welcomed, hands down, but I think his credibility would be shot. I really do.
Yeah, the credibility, yes.
Yeah. I think his credibility would be shot, right, because he, it's kind of like an artist when they die, right, their paintings or whatever it is becomes more valuable. But then all of a sudden, if they fake their death, come back to life, their painting doesn't become anything. So, with that being said, Elvis was somebody who couldn't escape the spotlight no matter what he did. He never got a break from public. And at the end of the day, to your point, he loved his preaching. He loved gospel music. Elvis wanted to do that, really nothing but that in country. He was swinging more towards country towards the latter part of his years. Elvis really wanted to get out of all of that. Mm-hmm. But the demand for him to keep going was greater. Elvis once said that a man is one thing, but an image is one thing, and he could never live up to the image he created. So imagine that. Imagine creating an image. So Richard creates this image of himself. That image, that expectation surpasses Richard. The Cool Guys, Ladies and Gentlemen podcast.